Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Mitch Light. He is the sideline announcer for Vanderbilt football. He is also an executive editor at Athlon Magazine. This show presented by the Well Coffee House, a Nashville area coffee house that provides fresh roast coffee along with its house-made pastries, breakfast, and lunch offerings. 4 locations to serve you in the Nashville area. You can find those in Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, and Bellevue. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We thank our co-presenting sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Today's news sponsored by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If your loved one has been hurt in any type of an accident, call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Well, we have a stunning final football score from Saturday, which we will discuss today. Vanderbilt beats Missouri 21-14. Gets its first SEC win of the season despite being a 21-point underdog. Running back Keyshawn Vaughn had 176 yards from scrimmage and 2 touchdowns. The Commodores have a bye week ahead. Our guest line, presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on these sheets for years. They're amazing. Had no clue how comfortable they could be till I got them. They're fair trade certified. That means they're made under safe conditions by men and women, treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you won't want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That's spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy to get $50 off your first set of sheets. Mitch Light joins us now. He's the sideline reporter for Vanderbilt football. Mitch, there's finally a victory to talk about. Thank you for joining us. I hope you are doing well.
I'm doing great, Chris. Yeah, and I think no doubt a surprising performance by the Commodores on Saturday.
Let's start with this. I'll go to the mailbag later, but I thought one of our mailbag questioners said this best. This is from LBV. Nobody saw Saturday coming. What happened?
If you knew, you'd make a lot of money in Vegas. I mean, it's funny because the spread was 21. Thought that was, high. And then, I found out earlier in the week that, Vanderbilt starting its third string quarterback, a walk-on, so it did not look like a formula for success based on this team, based on the way this team had played. But, you can throw out every cliche in there. Just talking to people on the sideline, not players or coaches, but other people. It's just like, that's why they play the game. And these kids are 18 to 22 years old. Those were the 2 most common phrases uttered to try and explain what was going on. And, team just played well. Defensively, obviously, that was the story of the game, considering how bad Vanderbilt had been against the run and the pass, and to hold Missouri to its lowest rushing total and its lowest passing total of the season was very impressive. So I wish I had a better explanation for it. It's not like this team had been knocking on the door and come close in its defeats. As we've talked about, and it's well documented, all the defeats have been lopsided. So, I surely can't sit here and say that I saw this one coming. But good for those guys and good for the players and the coaches and everyone. I always say this on this podcast, but, there's so many people that work so hard behind the scenes, and to see them experience the success was nice to see on Saturday.
Yeah, and also held Missouri to its lowest points total as well. But, Mitch, I think we're all at a loss to explain this to a certain extent, but was there anything that you picked up on the sidelines or in your prep that was interesting that helps explain some of it?
We, Joe and I talked about this early, and there was definitely a lot more energy on the sidelines than in previous games. And, sometimes that can be forced and manufactured, and then, that you get up there and you fall down 7-0 and it dissipates. But, I think they honestly had a good week of practice. I was there Thursday. It was very spirited. And that translated to Saturday. I think maybe, the UNLV game, I guess, I don't know if that was a wake-up call. You should have had a wake-up call, earlier in the year. Why wasn't Oxford a wake-up call? But maybe the UNLV was a bigger wake-up call for whatever reason. The coaching staff got their attention, and you can't explain a lot of it. But I think there was definitely better execution. I think the quarterback change probably gave the offense just something new, to rally around. And I think early success in the game defensively, probably gave the defense a lot of confidence. So, I mean, I didn't notice anything, strategically. Jason Tarver went up in the press box for the first time since he's been at Vanderbilt, and Jerry Godowski, as the offensive play caller, was on the field. So they shuffled the deck, some different coaches up in the box. But, I don't know enough about the strategy of the game to say that they did anything different. I think they'd tell you that the scheme was exactly the same. The guys they played better.
Derek Mason mentioned in the post-game press conference that Mo just gave them a lift. And I'm not going to say that this was all on Mo Hasan or that it even has to do with Mo Hasan being better than the other guys. But sometimes it's like, if you think the lucky rabbit's foot is what makes you better, then everybody knows that the lucky rabbit's foot is not the reason, but it's about the belief behind the object, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't know what credit Mo Hasan gets in all this, but certainly there was something to all that.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And kind of gave them a reason to believe or a reason to think to believe, hey, we got to change here. Maybe this guy will get it done. And, thinking about his strengths and weaknesses. Now, none of us have seen Mo Hasan enough to know about, the long-term projections with him as the quarterback. He did throw a really nice, relatively deep ball to Kalijah Lipscomb. But with what he brings to the table athletically, I think the positives more outweigh any weaknesses he might have throwing the ball. And I say that because they weren't, Riley Neal has a big arm, and Deuce Wallace might have a better arm than Mo Hasan. I don't know if he does, but Vanderbilt wasn't throwing the ball downfield anyway. So it's not like they're really giving anything up by putting Mo Hasan. Now they can take advantage of his strengths. Like if, Riley had been throwing the ball relatively well down the field, that'd be one thing, but they weren't doing that at all. So, right now, hoping Mo Hasan can get healthy for the South Carolina game, to me, he gives them the best opportunity to win because he adds that running element to the offense.
I was talking to someone and the comment was made, Mo Hasan is faster than I thought. This was after the game. I agree with that. He was 9 for 34 rushing. I think that includes one sack, although that was just for -4. But I'm with the person I talked to. I did not know that Mo had that kind of burst. I think there might be something there they can use. Now, whether they can use it or not, we'll get into a little bit later because there may be a concussion issue there. But that part was not something I expected to see.
Well, I mean, I knew he was a good athlete. I thought Andy Ludwig last year they did sort of late in the year. They did a good job kind of playing him in spots. I mean, I don't think he had maybe 6 or 7 carries, but I remember a couple of road games. Maybe it was Arkansas or Missouri, using him coming out of a timeout or at the end of a quarter where the other team probably didn't even know he was in the game. One of those things. And it's not like they ran him off the sideline and then he ran the read option and did a pretty good job there. So yeah, I don't know what his straightaway speed is, but he, and that near touchdown run, 21-yard run down to the 1-yard line, he showed a nice little burst there.
Yeah. And let's circle back to that because I think the run pass option was part of their preseason offense. I thought that Riley Neal didn't look particularly fast in the opener when they ran that some, but that was also against Georgia. They're pretty fast. I mean, let's look back at what Riley did before Vanderbilt. He ran for 1,500 yards. Now, I don't know how much he wants to run that. A lot of quarterbacks don't like taking the beating that comes with carrying the ball 10 times a game, but it is interesting that they just went away from that aspect of their offense. I mean, Riley had 2 carries for 14 yards. It's 2 carries, but he technically averaged more yards a carry than Mo Hasan did. So it's interesting that that's one aspect of the offense that they really worked on in preseason practices, that it just went away until Saturday.
Yeah, and I agree. And I just watching, from the field, I probably was, I don't know if disappointed is the right word. I thought Riley Neal would have a little more athleticism running the ball, based on his rushing stats and what little I saw of him play at Ball State. He can do it. He had a nice, picked up a big first down when Vanderbilt was trying to, run out the clock, or it was at least in the fourth quarter. If Deuce Wallace to me is the one that, probably was not as quick as I thought. And he hasn't run the ball much. Now, when Deuce has been in the game mostly, Vanderbilt's been losing, and maybe so they had to throw the ball more. But definitely I was wrong on that heading into the season, that I thought Vanderbilt would get a lot more rushing production out of those two at the quarterback position.
The thing that had the potential to change the game was the stretch where Hasan gets hit. I want to circle back to the hit itself in a moment, but Riley Neal comes in, first pass, throws a pick, 42 yards down to the 6. Missouri gets a pretty quick touchdown. You're thinking, okay, this is where the game is finally going to turn and the better team is going to win the game. That's not what happened. Just talk about that stretch and what you saw being down there.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. First of all, the hit on Mo was, I thought live, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but watching the replay, it was really dirty. I mean, he clearly gave himself up, and I forgot the guy's name, the defender.
Gillespie.
Did not need to do what he did. He just went down and kind of drove through it almost. And not only did he hit Mo's helmet, Mo's head bounced off the turf. So I think it was a boom, boom effect there, like my medical term. And then when Riley comes in and just, quite frankly, just threw a horrible ball. Clearly, if the one guy didn't pick it off, Wilkins, I think, had the interception. There was another Missouri guy right there who would have picked it off. So there's no doubt you could just the sideline was deflated after that. You could just feel, oh no, this isn't going to go well. But give them credit. I mean, defensively, I forgot the possession right after that. Offensively, but Vanderbilt's defense really continued to set the tone, and they give them all the credit in the world. They bounced back. I think Riley threw two or three more completions, but took care of the ball, and so they deserve a ton of credit for kind of overcoming that huge hurdle.
Yeah, the Missouri touchdown came late in the third quarter. That was Larry Roundtree's 6-yard run with 1:37 left. Cam Johnson scores the touchdown on a pass from Riley Neal with 8:57 to play. Great play by Cam there. And that was a 3-minute and 31-second drive. So I guess there was an exchange of punts in between. I've got the drive chart in front of me, but I'd have to dive in a little deeper here. But yeah, let's talk about the Cam Johnson play too. And I do want to circle back to the hit, but that was one heck of an individual play from Cam Johnson on that.
Yeah, and give Godowski credit for calling that. I mean, it was very easy to be conservative there with a tie game and, in field goal range. But he, gave Riley, threw the ball about 7 or 8 yards in the air, kind of across the field. It was a long throw, and Cam Johnson just used his athleticism to get into the end zone there, beat one guy, and then kind of, just at the goal line, just got past two guys. So, yeah, great play. His only catch of the game. But obviously his biggest moment in a Vanderbilt uniform.
Yeah, I'd give Cam probably more the credit there than the play call, because Cam made some guys miss and weave down the sideline. But to the play call itself, it was interesting. I'm not taking away from the play call, because I did think here's the element about that made it interesting and maybe made it work was. I remember saying to somebody right before the play, okay, this is where it's 3rd and 7. They just need to run Keyshawn to the middle of the line. Missouri was stacking the box. And Keyshawn, sometimes if you make one good block, he's by you and he's got to score at that point. That's what I thought the play call would be, not just for that reason, but also because I think the ball was on the far hash mark, or the one closest to the press box. My memory could be wrong, but I'm thinking they'll want to get the ball to the middle of the field, and I thought that's why they would run that play. So maybe a little deception there with the call, because maybe Missouri was thinking the same thing as well.
Yeah, so I thought it was a good call. And it was a pretty easy, I guess that pass, if the guy jumped the route, could have picked it up. It was a pretty, easy, relatively easy throw, even though it was across the field. So, yeah, I thought it was a good call.
The hit, my initial impression was yours. From the press box, my back was to the defender, and I initially thought it's not that big of a deal. Sometimes when a guy slides and mistimes his, when the defender, that puts a defender in a position where he's got to hold up, and sometimes there's just contact because you're having to react in split seconds and you're moving, and you can't always change what you want to do in a heartbeat. I didn't think that much about it at the time. When I saw the replay, I understood, okay, this is why they threw him out. When I watched that from the backside, that did look flat out dirty.
Yeah, and I don't know, I can't recall many times where guys have been suspended for more than the kicked out of the game and suspended for the first half of the next game. But if there was a time to warrant a extended suspension, I think that would be it. It was just totally not necessary too. You have a quarterback who had clearly given himself up, and it was almost like the guy had to make an effort to get that low to hit Riley. It wasn't one of those where a ball carrier dips his head or starts falling down and the defender's already started his tackle or launch himself or whatever, and it was just sort of like unavoidable. That was 100% avoidable.
We're going to get in the mailbag in a second, but one more thing from me. What was it like watching Missouri during and after the game? Because let's face it, Missouri was the only team in the East that did not have a loss in league play. I'm not going to say Missouri was in the driver's seat because I don't think they're the best team in the East, but when you're 2-0 and we're mid-October, you get a lot in your favor there. Missouri had a lot to play for. I don't understand what happened there. What was your interpretation from watching them? How was that team and that sideline reacting as the game went on and as it was over?
Well, I mean, from up in the press box, you probably have a better view of the Missouri sideline. It's difficult for me to tell a lot, especially being down low. I talk a lot of college football on our podcast and radio interviews, and kind of Missouri had come up in the past few weeks, and I had kind of my line on them was like, I'm not ready to anoint them as even a potential, favorite in the SEC East. I still thought Georgia and Florida were clearly better. Missouri had lost that game at Wyoming, had won 6 straight games at home. Their best team they played was South Carolina probably, and then Ole Miss. It wasn't like they had played a top 25 team. They hadn't really gone on the road in the league. So I before the season, I thought they'd be the 3rd best team in the East, and that's probably where they still are. So I wasn't shocked that they didn't look great, I guess is the way to put it. But Vanderbilt had struggled pretty much against every team so far on both sides of the ball. So I guess that was the big surprise there. Bryant has a nice arm, and he hurt Vanderbilt at times with his legs. The one thing I commented about this on the air to Joe and Norman, Missouri, one thing that had made them, when they first got good in the SEC, I remember it was one of my first years being down the sidelines, and I was really impressed by the size, strength, athleticism of their wide receivers. They just had some of the best looking wideouts in the league. And I'd say that every year, except this is the first year I noticed. Not that they're not good, but they're not as big. They're smaller. Nance, the kid from Arkansas, is not very big. They weren't as physically impressive at the skill positions that I've seen, just kind of passing the look test. The running backs are good. Vanderbilt did a good job on the running back. So I guess my long-winded answer is saying I didn't think Missouri was going to be that great. They clearly weren't as good as I expected them to be. So, I thought the point spread was fair based on it, but that was more based on Vanderbilt's performance than based on what Missouri had done.
Yeah, their receivers last year, they had Hall and I think Jonathan Johnson and some guys like that. This year, outside the tight end, it looks like they just have guys based on Saturday.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. And Kelly Bryant's a good player. And I was just curious this year to see, was he a decent quarterback who was on some really great Clemson teams, or was he a really good quarterback? And I think he's probably a little better than I thought he'd be at South Carolina. At Missouri, he's got a big arm, and I think he could play in the NFL possibly, but I don't think he's – I didn't look at him like, wow, that's going to be one of the best players Vanderbilt faces this year.
Well, and Jonathan Johnson is still on the team. He just didn't do anything. I mean, he had 3 catches for 9 and was basically invisible. So
right, yeah. I mean, Vanderbilt limited the big play, and that was one of the many keys to the game.
Let's go to the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. If you're looking for a one-stop shop to take care of your insurance needs, Josh has you covered. Call him today, 615-933-1979. Email him, josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at JoshuaMintonHQ or at Facebook.com/JDMintonHQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it here. Door 74 says, What do you think accounts for the difference between Saturday and the rest of the season? Do you think the good play continues?
Kind of talked about in the opening. Who knows? I mean, I don't. Up to a certain point, we thought it was the level of play, the level of opponent, excuse me. But then that doesn't explain Purdue. That doesn't explain Ole Miss. Clearly doesn't explain UNLV. So I don't know. Confidence is a huge thing. Kids are 18, like I said before, 18 to 22 years old. The ball starts rolling in your favor early in the game, and you get confidence. I think credit the coaching staff for getting these guys' attention because, seeing that team on the field and after the game, the UNLV game, it didn't look like this team had it in it. And they bounced back mentally, physically, and all that. So I wish I had a better answer. I'm sure the coaching staff doesn't even really know. You can't explain it, but you see that across the board in college football. Illinois beats Wisconsin. There's crazy games every week, and fortunately for Vanderbilt, it was involved in a crazy game this week.
Dusty Orleans has a question that I'm going to skip over because I think it's sort of I think we've kind of gone over the answer already, but this one from Matthew00, did Tarver really call the defense or did Mason? That's something I'm still not sure of because something looked different to me. I mean, they were in better position. That they didn't look anything like the defense that we had seen the first 6 games.
Yeah, I have no reason to believe he did not call the game. He's up in the press box. The communication, obviously there's different communication on the field because he's not there helping signal stuff in. Weichert, the outside linebackers coach, is one of the primary defensive signal coaches who signal plays in, and he was doing the same thing there. So I don't, other than the mechanics changing because some coaches being up in the box and, Mark Mattioli, who's been in the box all year, was down on the field, the secondary coach. Again, I was not told that Mason was calling the defense, so I have no reason to believe it was Tarver until we're told otherwise.
This from Ann Arbor Door, for both of us, who was a key player on both sides of the ball that you feel made a difference in the game? In other words, without those players, Vanderbilt does not win.
I thought Andre Mintz played well. I thought Dio played, one of his better games. They were without Davion Davis, who's in injury. I'm told it's nothing serious, but true freshman who started at nose or defensive tackle for 2 games, so they went into that game really thin on the defensive line. So I credit all those guys up front. It's easy to say Mo Hasan, Cam Johnson. I thought the offensive line did a pretty good job. I thought it was one of Keyshawn Vaughn's better games too, because they were stacking the box and those yards were tough to come by. And we haven't talked about the 6-minute drive. Vanderbilt, I watch a lot of college football. It's very difficult when the team knows you're going to run the ball to run off 6 minutes of the clock to end the game. That was very impressive. So a lot of that's Keyshawn Vaughn, but you got to credit the offensive line as well.
Yeah, Keyshawn is the easy answer on the offensive side of the ball because he was far and away the most impactful player on the field. I think the Cam Johnson play, if they don't make that one, who knows what happens. They have a field goal try. They probably hit it, but I think it was a little bit of a wet field. You were down there. You can tell me on that. On defense, I had Alan George as my player of the game. Thought he played a solid game. Of course, he had the biggest defensive play of the game with the pass in the end zone. The guy that I thought played well, and he didn't get a tremendous grade on Pro Football Focus as a look at the grades, but I thought B.J. Anderson, they tested him in coverage several times deep. He was right there with this guy. I thought that's one that, like if BJ slips and falls or gets a guy with position on him or whatever, they were going for the home run ball against him. He's a guy that I thought had an underrated good game.
Yeah, and he gave up the first big UNLV deep pass. I believe it was him. I don't know if that was the first touchdown or what, but he got beat in the UNLV game. He was. They've been raving about him since last year, and I believe you might know more than me. He was one of the least heralded of last year's signees, and a really good athlete. And they've liked him a lot, and he's passed up some guys on the depth chart, and he's been playing a lot of snaps the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, my understanding is he's one of the fastest guys on the team. They have ways of measuring that in terms of game speed. And I don't know if he's the fastest, but he may be. He's right up there from what I have heard.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing.
Brain 13 says this was the first game this season where it felt, quote, normal in the stands. This team gave fans something to cheer for and responded to Missouri every time it needed to. Could you feel it down on the sidelines? And do you feel like the team fed off a little positive energy?
Yeah, I think there was positive. There were just more positive vibes all around. And usually, like, I don't notice stuff, but our tailgate is for our tailgate show that I host with Norman Jordan. We're set up right outside the alumni football tailgate, and there were seemingly more football, more because of homecoming, I guess, or a bunch of guys just came. Like, saw Jamie Winburn and Ainsley Battles before the game. Had a picture of them and my son. Rock Batten, but just saw a bunch of guys. There was a bunch of former basketball players there. There's just a better vibe the whole day, seemingly. And then when the team gets off to a good start, like the question said, the crowd started believing. It wasn't just waiting for something bad to happen. So I would agree with that assessment. That sort of like all around, everyone just kind of fed off the positive energy.
Mr. Vandy says, what was the mood like for the team after the hit on Mo Hasan?
People were pissed, and I was trying to think where I was. Because a lot of times I watched, if the ball's inside the 30, either way, I watched from the end zone a lot. So, but I was on the sideline then. So the guys were mad, clearly. And then there was concern for Mo, and, yelling some stuff. It was a very chippy game. Anyone who's there probably knows. I thought from the get-go, both teams were chippy. So that increased the chippiness of it. But they were definitely mad.
Papa Hick 4VU says, are you hearing anything in regards to Mo Hasan's status for the future? Did he suffer another concussion? If you were Mo, would you play again given the history of concussions? I think the background of that question is I've heard Mo has had 3 or 4 of these. I'm not going to swear that's accurate, but I think that was what kept him out last year when he was the backup quarterback and we didn't see him beyond game 7 or 8 or whatever it was. And I don't know that I had an occasion to play him, but I don't think he was going to play anyway. What's your insight on that?
I don't really know. He got a concussion last year, got hit at the goal line. I don't know if it was the Ole Miss game or one game later in the year and, didn't play again, I don't think. I'm not going to speculate. Everyone saw what happened. Guy got hit in the head and didn't play again. That's how, I'm not really going to speculate. And he was in the locker room after the game. That's all I know. And the team probably might not even practice Sunday. They probably had meetings, but when there's a bye week, they usually give them a couple of days off, and then it's way too early to speculate about his availability for the South Carolina game. And I don't know his history. If he has had 3 or 4 concussions, that will factor in his decision to keep playing. But I don't even want to speculate on that.
Yeah, and they never announced a concussion, but look, when the guy's lying down on the field and gets up and his first couple steps are really wobbly, it doesn't take a genius to figure out what's going on there.
Right.
In terms of what I have heard, there's a photo that USA Today took that I'll use in an article this week where he was smiling after the game and on the field. Obviously, he'd not been taken off the field and sequestered somewhere else, so there was that. I was also heard secondhand that he was out and about, I think, doing college things after the game Saturday night. Again, I don't know that has any relation to how they would treat a concussion, but
if he was out Saturday night, that's a good sign that he's not in a dark room,
Right.
So that would seem to be a positive sign.
Unless he was supposed to be in a dark room
right.
and then went and did his own thing, which, college kids tend to do. I don't know the truth there, but that's what I have heard. Theodore 8 says the difference between Hasan and Neal was pretty stark on Saturday. How does a guy that looked that good get buried on the depth chart at such a crucial position?
I've been asked that a lot. My dad asked me that last night. There's a reason, he didn't have a scholarship coming out of high school. He walked on at Syracuse. I've talked to a Syracuse writer I know, and I think basically the reason Mo thought he was deserving of a scholarship and the Syracuse staff didn't, so he left. And coming out of junior college, he might have had some small school offers, FCS offers I'm not aware of, but walked on at Vanderbilt. he seems like a good athlete with a decent arm. I don't know. It's not like Vanderbilt had a big miss. At least they recruited him and thought he was good enough to be a recruited walk-on. So that's a good question, and I hope he comes back, and I hope we can find out more if he can be a viable quarterback. And I felt really bad for him on Saturday. Kid finally gets his chance and is playing well and gets hurt. So I really hope he gets a chance to come back and start some more games.
Well, efficiency-wise, he, I guess, maybe had their best game of the season. He was 7 of 11 for 120 yards and a touchdown, although, boy, half that was a dump off to Keyshawn Vaughn, and he did the work. That inflated the numbers. Yeah, it reminds me kind of the Patton Robinette situation a few years ago, where everybody said, well, Patton's a winner. They keep winning with him. He's obviously the answer. How do people not see that? I'm like, well, let's back off a little bit. A lot of those were situations where the defense played really well. It was a low-scoring game. One or two plays made the difference. Patton seemed to have the knack for making those plays. I am not taking anything away from Mo Hasan or Patton Robinette, but I think there's a little bit of that in play here.
Yeah, and Patton was a relatively highly recruited kid. North Carolina, Vanderbilt, SEC, ACC offers. It just the question was more about how does a kid like that not even get any offers when he clearly has a skill set that can translate to college, to the way college football is played now. I can't imagine him not being a viable option at some group of five schools. So. But the skill set, that's a good comparison, I would say, with the skill set Pat Robinette.
Jay Tolk says it seems like this happens almost yearly with Mason's team. Slow start that lead to the team spiraling downwards and backed up against the wall. Only then does Mason make significant changes to allow the team to be in positions to win. And he just wants your thoughts on that sentiment.
I mean, I think that's a little too simplified. This year was different than any other year, in my opinion, because the team had been so bad in the first few games, the first half of the season. I'm looking at last year, lose by 5 to Notre Dame. The South Carolina game was disappointing, the Georgia game, but play well at Florida, lose by 10, lose by 7 to Kentucky. Things weren't spiraling out of control last year. Then they played Arkansas, Ole Miss, Tennessee. The schedule softened up, and they took advantage, and they were a good offensive team with Kyle Shermer at quarterback. 2016, the other bowl season, I think was the same thing. A lot of closer losses earlier in the year. Losing to Florida by 7, Kentucky by 7, Auburn by 7, Missouri by 9. So I don't think they were drastic. I don't think the team was spiraling out of control. There was anything drastic going on that they made these changes. I think they just started playing better offensively, and again, the schedule softened up. So I think this year was completely different. Because of lack of competitiveness on both sides of the ball.
Door74 says, do you have any men's hoops tidbits to share?
Not really. At this point, usually I've been over to practice a couple times. I've not been able to get over there. Heard some good things about Ejike Obena, which we've kind of heard things through both coaching staffs. And I will say I've just heard really positive. We probably said the same things about Bryce Drew, so it might be a broken record with any new staff, Chris. But I've heard very positive things about the tone at practice, and the players seem to really enjoy playing for Jerry Stackhouse. I think you talk to some people, and word comes out how the culture wasn't great in years past, some selfishness, and I'm sure that had centered around the way they built that roster last year around Darius and Simi Shatu, 2 5-star guys. I think it's probably more of a everyone's treated the same type situation. I think from what I've heard, the players really enjoy the culture that the new staff has set.
Okay, now is my weekly what stood out to you in college football, and particularly as it pertains to any future opponents. I just want to hear your thoughts on what you saw and what was significant this week. And by the way, speaking of big upsets, Illinois and Wisconsin, that was one that nobody saw coming either.
Right. Yeah, that one kind of stole Vanderbilt's thunder on a national scale because that was an even bigger upset. Yeah, that was shocking to me because Wisconsin had looked so good through the first half of the season. Wasn't a ton of other noteworthy stuff. I mean, there's some interesting Pac-12. Utah continues to look great. Oregon with a nice comeback win against Washington. I think Oregon and Utah are 2 really good teams. I think we're going to see Alabama's going to be interesting. Fortunately for them, they play Arkansas next week because they look like I'm not going to say Alabama's average. They don't look as elite without Tua at quarterback getting hurt there. So they have 3 weeks to get 3 weeks to get him healthy for LSU. I think Tennessee continues to improve. Their quarterback situation's interesting because Maurer, speaking of concussions, he keeps getting concussed, and clearly Jeremy Pruitt's not a big Jared Garantano fan if you watch the game there. But I think Tennessee continues to improve there, which will be no easy game for Vanderbilt. Kentucky's a team that right now is struggling. They probably will have Sawyer Smith back, their quarterback, when Vanderbilt plays them, but he's nothing special there. They've been going with Lynn Bowden at quarterback, and he's a wide receiver there. So it'll be interesting for Vanderbilt down the stretch. There's definitely some winnable games. I'm interested to see how Vanderbilt looks against South Carolina. That's, to me, they're going to be – are we going to see this effort sustained, or are they going to revert back to where they were earlier in the year? I would think they'll be pretty good or better than they've been. I don't know if they'll play as well as they did against Missouri, but I think that's going to be really interesting to watch in a couple weeks.
Yeah, Tennessee, the quarterback situation is going to be very interesting to watch because I think Maurer's now had 2 concussions. They've got a game. They play South Carolina next week, I think?
Yeah, at home.
So I don't know how that will play out. To Jeremy Pruitt's credit, he took him out of the game pretty immediately once he realized at least what it looked like had happened. The Garantano incident blew up, but I don't know that he should have tugged his face mask. It wasn't this Woody Hayes thing that people made it out to be. But, man, he was pretty hot at Garantano, who just kind of, I guess, tried to take the opportunity to steal the glory there and completely botched the play call. I don't know that I would have grabbed the kid's face mask, even if it was brief and I don't think as big as it was blown up to be. But he had every right to be hot at Garantano on that one, I think.
Yeah, but he needs to act. Some people say a certain person needs to be more presidential. He needs to be more head coach like, and not. Sometimes he coaches like he's a fan. He runs up and down. He screams. There's nothing wrong with yelling at your players, but he just, what game was it when it was the Air Force game and Alontae Taylor, blew the coverage there, just sitting there screaming at him on the sidelines. And there's a place for that. Maybe it's the film room, maybe it's back in the huddle and stuff like that. But he's, to me, from the outside looking in, he needs to control his emotions a little bit more as a head coach.
All right, let's handicap best chances at a win going forward. I think Florida would be the toughest. ETSU would be the easiest. What do you do with the middle part of that there?
Let me pull up the schedule real quick.
Well, I think it's South Carolina and Tennessee and Kentucky and ETSU. Of course, we already mentioned ETSU, but
I would think Kentucky at home would, ETSU would be the best chance. Kentucky would be the next best chance. Then I think you probably say at Tennessee, then at South Carolina, then at Florida. Obviously, we'll see what happens in the Tennessee-South Carolina game right now. South Carolina's been kind of inconsistent, but they looked good for a half against Florida. There was a weird game in the rain there, and obviously they won at Georgia. So I think right now you'd have to say South Carolina's a better team than Tennessee.
All right, Mitch, we're done with the show today. I want to give you a moment to talk about the Cover 2 podcast. Tell people where they can purchase issues of Athlons. The basketball issue is on newsstands. It has been for weeks. And, of course, your Twitter account, which I'm sure you'd like to promote as well.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Athlon Sports College Basketball Magazine is out on newsstands everywhere and on our website, athlonsports.com/store. My Twitter is Athlon Mitch. And then twice a week, Cover 2 podcast with me and Braden Gall. We do it Mondays and Wednesdays. And you can find that on our website or anywhere basically you get podcasts.
Thank you, Mitch.
No problem, Chris. Talk to you soon.
You bet. He is Mitch Light of Athlon Magazine. He is also the sideline announcer for Vanderbilt football, a reporter, if you prefer that term. Anyway, I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. We appreciate you listening. We will have several episodes coming your way as the week goes on.